Have you ever wondered what the price of a dream is? Not your dream, but the dream of belonging, of being someone everyone wants to know. There is a fine line between the ambition that builds empires and the illusion that destroys them. On the world stage, some people don't just act, they become the character, blurring the line between truth and lies so masterfully that they drag everyone around them into the farce. Welcome to the truth, dark psychology. Today we will dissect the mind behind one of the greatest identity scams of our generation, a story that proves that to deceive the elite, you must offer them exactly what they most desire, a mirror of their own ambitions. If you are fascinated by the shadows of the human mind, subscribe and like the video, because the truth we are about to expose is darker and more complex than any fiction. Every great manipulation begins with the creation of an irresistible narrative. In the case we are analyzing today, the main character was not born, she was meticulously fabricated. The persona of a German heiress, possessing a 60 million euro fortune, was not a random choice. It was a masterstroke of social psychology. The vague trust fund was the perfect excuse for a lack of immediate liquidity, a genius barrier against quick checks. This tactic exploits a fundamental human vulnerability: cognitive laziness. In a fast-paced world, we rarely stop to question the details of a story that sounds so good, especially when it is presented to us with unshakable confidence, in the right places and to the right people. The choice of a European identity, with a studied accent and mannerisms, added a layer of exoticism and sophistication. For New York's elite, always in search of the new and the exclusive, this origin made her instantly more interesting. She wasn't just rich, she was culturally rich, a product of the old world ready to conquer the new. The psychology behind this is the creation of a narrative hook. She wasn't just asking to get in, she was offering a story, a spectacle, and people were eager to buy a front-row ticket, not realizing they themselves would pay for the entire production. The danger and genius of this first step lie in its simplicity. She didn't need perfect false documents or a proven lineage at the start. She just needed a plausible story and the audacity to tell it without blinking. This teaches us a dark lesson about perception. Reality is often secondary to the confidence with which a lie is projected. She understood that people don't fall in love with facts, but with possibilities. The possibility of being close to immense power, of being part of something grand, was a narcotic powerful enough to override common sense. This identity construction is a classic example of the mirroring and projection tactic. She projected the image that New York's elite most admired: effortless wealth, discreet power, and limitless ambition. In doing so, she became a mirror of their desires. To criticize or doubt her would be like doubting the very values they cherished. It was a psychological checkmate from the first move, turning skepticism into self-doubt, and ensuring that even before the scam began, her future victims were already emotionally and psychologically invested in her success. In the end, the foundation of all her influence was not real money or power, but total control over her own fabricated narrative. She was the author, director, and lead actress of her own life, and she invited everyone to watch. What no one knew was that the script required the audience to pay for everything. The creation of this persona was not just a disguise, it was the main weapon, forged in the fire of careful observation of the weaknesses and vanities of human nature. A fundamental lesson of dark psychology. Once the seed of identity was planted, the next step was to make it flourish in the most exclusive gardens in the world. For this, she used one of the most potent tools of social influence: social proof. The principle is simple and devastatingly effective. If important people believe you are important, then you become important. She didn't try to enter through the front door. She infiltrated through backstage parties, private dinners, art events. Every photo next to a celebrity, every casual mention of a powerful contact, was another brick in the construction of her fabricated legitimacy, and no one wanted to be the one to question a structure that seemed so solid. The strategy was a human domino effect. She used one person's credibility to access the next, and so on. By staying in the most expensive hotels and frequenting the trendiest restaurants, She wasn't just spending money she didn't have. She was investing in her social capital. The environment around her became her proof of value. The five-star hotel concierge who treated her like a VIP, the famous personal trainer who served her, all became unwitting witnesses to her farce, reinforcing everyone else's belief. This is a form of environmental manipulation, where the setting is as much a part of the con as the con artist herself. The elite, as shrewd as they may see themselves, are particularly vulnerable to this type of tactic. Their world is a bubble, governed by unwritten codes of conduct and, above all, by appearances. The fear of committing a social gaffe, of being seen with the wrong person, or worse, of being the only one not to recognize the new it person, is paralyzing. She exploited this fear perfectly. Her presence became a status test. Being her friend was a sign that you were in the know, and questioning her risked exposing your own ignorance or lack of connection, a capital sin in these circles. This infiltration also reveals a dark truth about trust. We don't trust people, we trust signs and symbols. An expensive hotel, designer clothes, a conversation about contemporary art. These are mental shortcuts we use to judge someone's worth without the work of a real investigation. She mastered the language of these symbols and used them to hack the high society's trust system. She didn't need to prove her wealth, only to perform the rituals associated with it, and the minds of her victims automatically filled in the blanks. In essence, she turned herself into an exclusive secret that everyone wanted to have. By exploiting the human need for belonging and the fear of exclusion, she made intelligent and powerful people compete for her attention. Each new follower, each new wealthy friend, was not just a potential victim, but a walking billboard advertising her credibility to the rest of the world. Social proof became a self-perpetuating cycle of deception, growing in power with each new person who fell into the web. The true heart of her strategy was not in having money, but in using debt, both financial and psychological, as a sophisticated form of control. Her most famous tactic was to forget her wallet, have her card declined, or promise a wire transfer that never arrived, forcing friends and establishments to cover her exorbitant expenses. This was not a simple act of theft. It was a mechanism to create a web of obligations. By allowing others to pay for her, she turned them from friends into investors, creating a power dynamic where they now needed her to succeed so they could be reimbursed. The promise of the Anna Delvey Foundation, a multi-million-dollar arts club, was the perfect bait. This grand vision of the future justified all the small loans of the present. It's a classic long-con tactic. Create a promise so grand and appealing that the day-to-day inconsistencies and problems seem trivial in comparison. The victims weren't just paying for a dinner. They felt they were investing in a monumental project, buying a piece of her future success. This shifted the perception from being scammed to being privileged business partners. The psychology of shame was her greatest ally. Once someone had paid for her once, twice, 10 times, it became increasingly difficult to confront her. Admitting they were deceived would mean admitting their own naivety, greed, or poor judgment. For high society individuals whose image is everything, this public or even private admission is unbearable. She counted on the fact that her victim's embarrassment would be a more effective gag than any threat, allowing her to operate with impunity for a surprisingly long time. She also used social etiquette as a weapon. In a world where speaking openly about money is considered classless, asking a 60 million euro heiress to pay for a $20 drink seemed petty and insulting. She created an aura of such overwhelming wealth that anyone who questioned her finances seemed like the fool, not her. This inversion of blame is a high-level manipulation technique, making the victim feel bad for setting a healthy boundary. She turned the elite's rules of politeness into her own insurance policy. In the end, this web of debt placed her at the center of power. Everyone around her had a vested interest in keeping the charade alive. The friend who paid for a trip to Morocco, the hotel waiting for a wire transfer, all needed to believe the lie as much as she did. She wasn't just controlling individuals. She was manipulating an entire ecosystem to sustain her fabricated reality. The debt became more than money. It became invisible chains that bound her victims to her narrative, making them reluctant accomplices in their own downfall. One of the most fascinating and disturbing aspects of her character was her peculiar brand of charisma. She was not the warm, flattering scammer one might expect. On the contrary, she was often described as demanding, arrogant, critical, and even rude. And counterintuitively, this behavior didn't push people away. It drew them in. This is a profound lesson in dark psychology. In certain contexts, arrogance is interpreted as proof of power. She projected the idea that true wealth and high status do not need to apologize or ask for permission. They simply demand. Her audacity was her armor. Her victim's logic was simple, though flawed. No one would act so blatantly entitled and confident unless they had the power to back it up. It was a bluff of epic proportions. Every disdainful look, every outrageous demand served to reinforce the belief that she was genuine. If she were faking, surely she would be nicer, more careful. This boldness created a reality distortion field around her, where the normal rules of social interaction did not seem to apply to her. This phenomenon can be explained by the halo effect, but in a twisted way. Once people accepted the central premise that she was a wealthy heiress, her halo, all her other personality traits were interpreted through that lens. Her rudeness was not seen as a character flaw, but as the eccentricity of a genius or the impatience of the truly powerful. They didn't see the real person behind the mask. They saw the projection she had built and adjusted their perceptions to fit the narrative, a dangerously common human tendency. This unwavering confidence also served to intimidate and silence doubts. Confronting her was not just uncomfortable, it was frightening. She had a remarkable ability to make anyone who questioned her feel small, foolish, and inferior. This psychological domination is a control tactic used to keep people off balance and on the defensive. By keeping others in a state of slight insecurity, she ensured that the focus would never be on her own inconsistencies, but rather on the supposed inadequacies of whoever dared to doubt her. The lesson here is chilling. Authenticity, or at least the perception of it, can be fabricated more effectively, not through friendliness but through a calculated display of power and disdain. She showed us that confidence, even if entirely baseless, can be a more valuable currency than money. Her charisma didn't come from warmth, but from coldness. It was a predatory charisma, mesmerizing its prey not with sweetness but with the dangerous and irresistible promise of being close to pure, relentless power. If this analysis of the shadows of the human mind has you captivated, take a quick break. Like this video, subscribe to The Truth, Dark Psychology, so you don't miss a thing, and comment below with another controversial figure we should put under our microscope. Your suggestion could become our next dive into the hidden truth. 1. Of the deepest questions this case raises is about the internal psychology of the manipulator herself. To what extent was she aware of her own farce, and to what extent did she begin to believe the persona she created? This is where we enter the dark psychological territory of self-deception. To maintain a lie of this magnitude, with so many details, and under so much pressure, a level of belief in one's own invention is almost necessary. This isn't imposter syndrome, where successful people feel like a fraud. It's its dark opposite, where a fraud feels genuinely deserving of success. This phenomenon can be linked to cognitive dissonance, living as Anna Delvey 24/7, while internally, knowing it's all a lie creates immense psychological conflict. The easiest way to resolve this conflict is not to abandon the lie, but to suppress the truth. Over time, the persona may have become more real to her than her original identity. She was no longer just playing an heiress. In her mind, she was the heiress, and the world that refused to give her what was hers by right was the one that was wrong. Her behavior during the trial and in subsequent interviews is telling. The lack of remorse, the apparent indifference to the consequences, and the continued concern for her image and outfits can be seen as the final proof of this fusion with the persona. For her, the trial wasn't about her crimes, but about the system's failure to recognize her greatness. This disconnection from reality is a trait often associated with narcissistic and antisocial personality disorders, where empathy is absent and self-image is inflated to pathological levels. Maintaining this facade requires a superhuman amount of mental energy and emotional control. Every conversation, every transaction, every social media post was part of a high-stakes performance. The psychological toll of such a life must be immense, requiring extreme compartmentalization, the ability to separate thoughts, emotions, and identities to avoid a collapse. This skill, though destructive, is in itself a psychological feat, revealing a mind that is both brilliant and dangerously flawed. In the end, the question of did she believe her own lie may be the key to her entire success. Manipulators who are 100% cynical can be betrayed by micro-expressions of doubt, but the one who deceives themselves first, who truly believes in their own entitlement and their own story, becomes the most convincing liar of all. Her fabricated sincerity was her most powerful weapon because, on some distorted level, perhaps it was, to her, the purest truth. It is tempting, and in a way, comfortable, to see this story as the tale of a single, brilliant con artist. But to do so is to miss the deeper, more disturbing lesson. The truth is that the main character of this saga was not just an anomaly. She was a symptom, an almost perfect reflection of the sicknesses of our culture. She thrived in an ecosystem that values image over substance, wealth over character, and fame over virtue. She didn't create this world. She simply understood it better than anyone and used it as her personal playground, exposing the fragility of a system that prides itself on its exclusivity and insight. Her meteoric rise reveals an inconvenient truth about the elite she deceived. They were not just passive victims, they were eager participants. Their greed, their need to be close to power and money, and their vanity in believing they had discovered the next big thing, were the keys she used to open every door. She was the dark mirror that reflected their deepest desires back at them. In her promise of an exclusive arts foundation, they saw an opportunity to enhance their own status. In her, they didn't see a person, but an investment in their own social brand. Our collective fascination with her story also says a lot about us. Why are we so captivated by her audacity? Part of us, perhaps a part we don't like to admit, admires her courage to challenge a system that seems so impenetrable. She represents the dark fantasy of hacking life, of reaching the top not through hard work, but through sheer wit and boldness. She becomes an anti-hero for an age of inequality where the rules seem rigged in favor of the already powerful. Her story allows us for a moment to enjoy the downfall of those who seem to have everything. This narrative also exposes the superficiality inherent in the social media age, where life is curated to be a constant performance. She was the ultimate influencer, but instead of selling beauty products or detox teas, she sold a complete identity. She proved that if the packaging is luxurious enough, few people will bother to check the contents. Her story is a cautionary tale for all of us, showing that we are all susceptible to manipulation when our own insecurities and desires are at play, be it the desire for wealth, status, or simply to belong. In the end, the darkest lesson she teaches us is not about how to deceive others, but about how easily we are deceived. She did not succeed in spite of the society she lived in, but because of it. She exploited the cracks that already existed in the foundation of a world obsessed with appearances. She is the monster that didn't come from outside, but was born within the system itself, willed into existence by the culture's insatiable hunger for stories of wealth and power, no matter how false they may be. Every great performance has a final act, and in this case it was a spectacle that continued long after the curtains of the farce had fallen. The trial and conviction were not the end of the story. They were the beginning of a new and perverse transformation, that of the criminal into a celebrity. Even behind bars, she continued to manipulate the narrative, no longer with promises of wire transfers, but with Netflix deals, art exhibitions, and a defiant media presence. This reveals one of the darkest truths of modern fame psychology. Notoriety, regardless of its origin, is a valuable currency. The legacy she leaves is not just about the crimes she committed, but about how culture can absorb, package, and sell even the most unethical acts. The story was turned into entertainment and the criminal into a pop culture icon. This glamorization obscures the real human cost of her actions. For every magazine article that marvels at her audacity, there is a betrayed friend, an unpaid employee, a small business owner who faced real financial hardship. Her legacy is a case study in how empathy can be selectively switched off when a story is captivating enough. Psychologically, this transition from infamy to fame exploits our desire for archetypes. She became the daring scammer, an easy character to consume. By turning her into an archetype, we dehumanize her, both in her genius and her malevolence. This allows us to analyze her tactics with a safe distance, almost as if we were studying a fictional character, forgetting that her manipulations had tangible and painful consequences in the real world for real people who trusted her and were mercilessly betrayed. The consequences for her were prison and deportation, but the price paid by those she deceived was often psychological and long-lasting. The betrayal of a close friend, the public humiliation of being duped, the loss of trust in others. These are wounds that do not heal easily. This is the real price of the farce, a cost that is rarely mentioned in the glowing celebrity profiles. Her legacy is therefore twofold, one of entertainment for the masses and another of silent trauma for the individuals who were in her orbit. The final lesson her saga leaves us is a warning about the power of narrative in our era. She proved that if you can control your story, you can control your reality, even in the face of overwhelming evidence. Her story did not end with a guilty verdict. It continues to evolve, shaped by herself and by a culture hungry for complex and controversial characters. She forces us to ask, what is justice in a world where crime can lead to $1 million contract? And what is the ultimate price when the line between the truth and a good story becomes hopelessly blurred?